So welcome everyone to our panel discussion on artificial intelligence and its implications for work. We have set up a really exciting panel today. Let me introduce myself first and then I will introduce our panelists. My name is Stella Pachidi. I'm assistant professor in information systems at Judge Business School at the University of Cambridge. My research lies in the intersection of technology, work and organizing, and I'm particularly interested in how data and algorithmic technologies shape knowledge work. And I'm very, very excited and delighted to have together with us a combination of panelists from academia, policy, and the industry. So I will start with our academic panelists. So Zephyr Teachout. Zephyr is a law professor at Fordham Law School. She teaches on corporations, antitrust, and democracy theory. She has published two very interesting books. Her more recent one is titled Break 'em Up, Recovering Our Freedom from Big Age, Big Tech, and Big Money. And it explores the intersection of anti-monopoly law, labor, and democracy. Her prior book was named Corruption in America, and it traces the history of the meaning of corruption in American law. Her writing has also appeared in New York Times, Foreign Affairs, the New York Review of Books, Washington Post, and others. And Zephyr also serves the New York State Attorney General's Office as a special advisor and senior counsel for economic justice. Tomislav Karasic is a PhD candidate at King Center for Digital Innovation at Vrije Universiteit Amsterdam. Tomislav has a Master of Science in Logic from the University of Amsterdam, which I think gives him a very unique position to interpret the phenomena from both a philosophical as well as a technological perspective. And he's currently doing an ethnography of artificial intelligence in the context of plant breeding, and he's particularly looking at how AI is changing the nature of work in that context. I will move to our policy fellow, who also has academic appointments as well, so Mario Mariniello from the European Commission. Mario is currently a member of the European Commission's Future of Work unit. He is the author of Digital Economic Policy, which is a very interesting volume. It's sort of unique, I think, or at least first in its kind, because it provides a comprehensive overview of the entire digital policy area in a consistent framework. As I said, he's also affiliated with academic institutions, in particular the College of Europe in Poland and the University of Namur in Belgium, where he teaches a course in digital economy. He has previously served as senior fellow in Bruegel, where he launched and led Bruegel's project on the future of work and inclusive growth. And that project closely analyzes the impact of artificial intelligence on the nature, quantity, and quality of work, welfare systems, and inclusive growth at large. So looking forward to hearing more about that. And last but not least, we have our panelists from the industry, Henry Drogolski from Deloitte. Henry is a senior consultant specialized in HR strategy and service delivery in the human capital portfolio in Deloitte Consulting Netherlands. He has gathered experience from a large scale of international HR transformations and is going to talk more about that experience today. So without further ado, I would like to invite our panelists. So the way we have it structured is we're going to have our panelists give sort of like their positions through some introductory speeches. And I have prepared a few questions, but we have all of you in this room, so I'm going to refrain from asking all of my questions, and I would like to invite you to think of questions that you would like to ask our panelists today. So let's move with introductory speeches. Henry, would you like to start?
Yes, of course. So first of all, very excited to be here, and I was thinking starting with a statement, and should be provocative, but my statement is not necessarily provocative, since I think many of us will agree on the statement. But, so it's on the topic of AI and its implications of work, of course. So my statement is AI allows us to fundamentally reimagine how we view work. And in order to substantiate this, like rather than making incremental improvements for just a marginal productivity gains, we're able to take a little bit of a step back and then view work as a whole, and then use AI to fundamentally reimagine it. Okay, how can we reach this? How can we reach this lofty goal? By taking a look at the outcomes that organizations intend to achieve. When starting from the outcomes, we can kind of backwards engineer and then start looking at what are the tasks and skills that are required to achieve these outcomes. Once we have a view of what these tasks and skills are, we're able to see, okay, which of these tasks and skills are best suited for automation through AI, and which of these tasks and skills are best suited for our unique human capabilities. And then once we have a view of what the split is between these two groups, we can ensure that we can redesign work so that it's suited for our unique human capabilities. Thus, we can really humanize work and ensure that we can design our work so that it's human-centric. So the question then is, okay, why now? Why are we now suddenly able to do so? And kind of see three big triggers there. So first is from the technology side. So it's also one of the big reasons why we're here together. It's AI. So the maturity leap and the growth of AI over the last couple of years has really allowed us to start utilizing it and gaining the benefits from AI. So the technology is there, so it can kind of act as a catalyst for this change. Secondly, if we look at more demographical trends, we see, of course, a very tight labor market with shortages of talent, but also more a societal shift towards people and employees wanting meaning and value in their work. So really wanting to focus on those unique human tasks where they feel they can really add value. And then thirdly and finally also, of course, the productivity or organizational side. So over the course of the last few years, we've seen stagnating productivity growth. So something needs to change. It's not sustainable anymore. So we need to fundamentally rethink how we want to utilize AI. Then it's like a closing statement here. I can imagine it's a lofty goal to achieve this. So always say, try to think big, but start small. So one of the key things organizations can already start is by shifting towards a skills-based organization rather than a jobs-based organization, which requires a bit of a paradigm shift. So that's one. But on the other hand, also to ensure you can start exposing your employees and team members to experiencing and experimenting with AI and cognitive and automation, so they can already start to build these skills. I guess that's my opening statement, and keen to hear from the others and discuss in more detail.
Thank you very much, Henry. Thank you. We're now going to move to Tomislav. Tomislav, would you like to talk about that?
Yeah, of course. So I fully agree with Henry that it is an opportunity to fundamentally transform work. We need to do it ourselves. Right? It's the technology won't do it for us. And for a long time, we've been focusing on how machines should learn from humans, let's say through labeling, but now also the focus should be how then we can learn back from these machines. So first of all, very nice to see, sorry for people standing, but still nice to see so many interests in this topic. It is an important topic which is often discussed, particularly in the media, in quite this generic and simplistic manner. And people are throwing all these predictions that even these high status, knowledge intensive work such as radiology will be completely automated. But actually, when you go to the fields, you'll constantly see new surprises. So even work that might not seem, this very prestigious, like radiology, you can still see some findings. So my own case is that I want to present is that of seed sorting, right? So it's quite an exotic occupation because everybody is in touch with it. Probably all of the vegetables you've ever eaten in your life was once in the hands of seed sorters and seed cleaners. But definitely today, when you had your meal, you haven't really thought about them. And actually, when spending time with them, you can really, it's so informative, and it's so important to actually, spend time. And one of the insights that kind of they gave me is how you can actually engage with the technology to fundamentally transform transform your role. And so that's the first one, gone without looking. I think I covered it. So basically, just to kind of give you a sense of what they do. Well, seed sorting, their task is, well, sorting seeds. And how was this done before AI was introduced? So just to, of course, simplify it for time, imagine you have a bag that contains 200,000 seeds, and you have your eyes and your hands, and you need to spot which one is bad and put it to the side. So you can imagine how hard this thing is. So there's a lot of tacit knowledge and a lot of judgment calls that you make, but still you're not as efficient as, for instance, an AI that learns from millions of examples, isn't tired, doesn't get tired, and so on. So this is going great. And then, of course, the company said, well, let's invest in AI. And how was it done? So, for example, they take an X-ray image of a seed. They take the seed, put it into ground, wait for 2 weeks, and then you evaluate what happened. Did a plant grow? If so, is it good or is it bad? And you just label back the original image. You repeat this about 1 million times, and of course, you have this very successful model. It can predict quite well what kind of a plant can grow from the seed, and much better than a human can ever do. So if you follow what people say in the media, well, of course, why do you need seed sorters then if just the machine can do it autonomously? But the surprise was these people didn't give way, to borrow also your phrase, didn't give way to the algorithms, but actually started learning from the model and really became these important knowledge producers that weren't just relying on this tacit expertise and judgment calls, but actually they enabled themselves to build explicit knowledge that's shareable with other groups in the organization. Thus, instead of just being, let's say, isolated and just doing seed sorting, they become important collaborators for everybody else. And then kind of my statement is, why did this happen? Well, they weren't just passive receivers of model outputs. You weren't a loan officer, then the model just says, don't give loan. Instead, they were operating the machine, but they also had access, like actually seeing all of the images that the machine was taking, probability assignments that the machine was given to the seed. They can also just open the machine, see how it physically behaves. And this is a very big difference than just seeing an output on a screen. And also, this is a completely new way of looking and understanding the seed. So imagine having a bag with 200 pieces of seeds, trying to figure out what's bad, or now having a high-resolution X-ray image of the seed with all of the kind of digital byproducts that this machine is producing. So even though the task of sorting is completely automated, there's just a wealth of data and so much opportunities to actually learn stuff that nobody ever even knew before about the seed. And so basically, at the beginning, they were loading the seed. The machine makes a decision: this is good, this is bad. And sometimes it's a surprise. They see a bucket filled with seeds that the machine said it's bad, but they're like, oh, but this looks good, or vice versa. So kind of, why did the machine do this decision? So they start experimenting, interrogating the machine, trying to figure out, okay, what is it on the image? Maybe there's some pattern on the image that the machine is spotting that we don't. And basically through this interpretative work, as Stella helped me to also phrase it in our email exchange, so this interpretative work, they actually started learning about seed defects. And even over time, seed is a biological thing. It changes over time. So also new defects emerge, which of course isn't present in the historical data that was used for training. So suddenly this ability to spot this pattern recognition, not of the machine, but of the human, became very important, because then they can go to the machine learning developers, knock, knock. I think there's actually a new defect that just emerged that is in your data set. Or they can start collecting all of these examples, go to seed researchers, hey, I think here's an interesting case for your future project. And so this is a completely different role than they had in the organization before. So just to kind of say one last thing, so it is possible to organize work, and I do need to read this one. It is possible to organize work around and with AI instead of making humans obsolete. And we should not just focus that AI learns from humans, but also how to organize for learning from AI to transform at the actual work floor. And that's my message to the managers.
Thanks very much. Thank you. And I'm very excited to hear that my preparation of questions for the panel helped your theorizing.
Yes, yeah. So I can expect a good paper coming out of this. So thanks.
On the interpretive work.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. Zephyr, would you like to follow up?
Yeah. So I'm going to talk about people sorting. As you may have heard in the introduction, my background is actually in democratic theory. So what am I doing at a labor conference? But I came to this through anti-monopoly work, for the economists in the room, anti-monopsony work, and think there's something of a 5-alarm fire about to happen in the future of democracies if we do not address a growing threat of personalized wages. Again, for the economist in the room, you can think of this as first-degree labor price discrimination, or I sometimes call it surveillance wages. Wages that are different for two workers working for a large corporation. I'm not talking about the small workforce, think a platform, that are different than each other. And what I want to do today is lay out a sort of schema to think about the different ways in which personalized surveillance wages exhibit themselves, so that we don't just only think about this as the kind of extreme Taylorism that Sharon was talking about this morning, which I think is important. So the 5 kinds I'm going to talk about are extreme Taylorism, behavioral wages, gamification, experimentation, and dynamic wages. I'm going to spend most of my time on the first 2, but I think it's important to see all of them. So the extreme Taylorism, I think Sharon did a fantastic job of laying out, but it is being paid per productivity and per task. It may sound like it is transparent, but because extreme Taylorism involves combining different tasks, the worker is not always going to be aware of how their wage is related to their work, even if there is a pretty direct productivity alignment. So that's the first kind, right, is per piecework. For those of you who've worked on farms, wages for per task. A variation on that in the service sector is wages for productivity. Cornell has done some really interesting research on call centers. And productivity in the service sector is, of course, different because the efficiency of the engagement may relate to how the customer interacts with you. So the success in keeping the credit card customer involved may be different for Tomislav and myself. And maybe he is, in fact, more productive for the company, but that may be related to gender, age, race, nationality, and other features. So it's still a productivity model, but has really significant bias implications. The third kind, or I guess that's one kind, extreme Taylorism. Second is behavioral wages. Now you can think of this as basically your Facebook feed, which is individually targeted to each of you in order to maximize what Facebook can extract from each of you in advertising dollars, turned towards workers, identifying Tomislav and my different incentive structures such that the employer can maximize the surplus that the employer takes as compared to me. It happens that I'm in less debt than he is as a PhD student. I have been tenured for some time, so he is willing to take a lower wage. That's one just example of where you could see first-degree wage discrimination based on data the employer has collected about our financial situation, right? So then he gets paid $18 an hour and I get paid $20 because what it's going to cost to retain me is greater than what it's going to cost to retain him. I don't actually think this is that, we don't know how this is working now. Uber drivers report that this is happening. There's a lot of information we need to know. But there is certainly both incentive and opportunity in technology to make it so. So it's something we should be extremely concerned about. as with the second form of Taylorism, this has, of course, significant inequality implications and bias implications, right? So basically the employer is trying to identify the lowest possible wage at which you will continue to be productive, and each person is identified in different ways. Okay? The three other I'm going to skip over, but just to sort of raise up. Dynamic wages are when the wage is going to differ based on the demand. So we already see this in the platform service sector. How much you are paid for care work on day A is different than on day B. Of course, the more information you have, the more precise you can be. Morning child care versus midday child care being paid differently. It's not quite the same as the sort of classic first degree or personalized wages, because it is the same task, the same person, different person, same task, same wage. However, because different people work at different times, it still has the effect of atomizing the workforce with different wages per worker. Gamification, we know Amazon is doing this and other places do it. My nephew at McDonald's certainly got it, which is where there are games incorporated, often games that are taken from studying the same techniques used at casinos to incentivize work, and then wages and bonuses paid out, which then if Tomislav gets the bonus and I don't, we again have a first degree price discrimination. And then finally, experimentation. Chicken farmers I've spoken to deal with this all the time with Tyson, a form of platform. But the experimentation is when 250 workers are treated one way, 200 another, different incentives are used, and the workers are then given different wages as the company is using them to learn what creates the greatest productivity. Okay. Now, all of these have massive democratic effects. Because they, and God, I only have 5 minutes, excuse me, so I'll be very quick. One, these have not only work effects, inequality effects, racial effects, bias effects, but democratic effects, because the worker in this stage of radical informational asymmetry does not know why she is being punished, does not know what her wage is, has the solidarity with her coworkers destroyed, and lives in a state of fear that they can be penalized or their pay can shift. And it may be because of that wristwatch, which is recording. So even if it is actually because of experimentation, the paranoia then affects the speech, and work is one of the key places in which democracy in the public space is created. Short version. My conclusions are that notice and consent is clearly insufficient. Proportionality review, GDPR model is clearly insufficient to address this. And that the three sort of primary areas that I think we should be looking at are, one, banning first degree wage discrimination. So I'm sort of I want to think small and start big instead. Banning not just turning to the best level of labor coordination and labor rights we've ever had, but better than ever because we have never had this degree of information asymmetry. And finally, using anti-monopoly and antitrust, because that is the key tool through which capital's ability to coordinate and amass information as a third critical tool, and better than we have ever had it, in order to have the power imbalance and those ongoing conversations about what is and is not collectible to be had in a space with greater parity. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Zephyr. And I have a feeling that your different paradigms could easily fit different Black Mirror episodes. Thank you. Mario?
I'm really glad to be here. The discussion is already very, very interesting. So I mean, like, I would be tempted just to skip my initial remarks, just to reply to what you said. But anyway, I mean, I will try to put a little bit all this in a more policy context. I mean, it's fair to say that societies are more and more exposed to a significant level of uncertainty. And of course, technology is a major contributor to that. We're also seeing that societies are becoming more and more unequal, while at the same time we see an increasing level of digitalization. So there is a little bit of a paradox here compared to the narrative that comes together with technology often, that I mean, like, that will enhance the human condition. And I think at the roots of that paradox, there lies certainly the ways in which we access technology, but also the way in which we use technology. Something that we heard, like many times. So artificial intelligence is really capable of exacerbating the power gap between those who have power, those who don't have. And of course, this is, the perfect setting for this is the workplace, where there is a strong asymmetry of power. Now, this discussion seems a little bit abstract, but it has very concrete policy implications. So if you, just for example, if you take what we are doing with the Artificial Intelligence Act at the European Union level, well, there we are trying to, to improve the quality of technology, right? We want to have it like the least bias as possible, ideally, unbiased technology. But this is just a necessary and not sufficient condition to prevent harm, because even the most unbiased technology, if you use it in a bad way, can cause harm, right? So you need complementary actions, both at developing level and at use level, in order to prevent harm and therefore foster acceptance and then even more adoption of technology, which is also something that we are very much interested in. Now, the first obstacle that you encounter with policy in this context in particular is with definition. What are we talking about here? Artificial intelligence, algorithmic management, what it is? What is the level of automation that begs for policy intervention? Is an Excel sheet already like automation somehow? No, I'm just, of course, provoking. But what I want to say here is that there is a level of subjectivity, okay, that it will always be there, and the process is never linear. It's not that you start with the definition, then you identify the issues, and then you come with the solutions. It's more likely that you adjust the scope of what you need to deal while you are working on the policy definition. Now, okay, sorry, what did I say wrong? So then when it comes to the role of policy, okay, in order to define that, you need to go through 3 steps. Okay, first one is, what is the social optimum that we are looking for? What is really the place where we want to be? And for that, we really need to identify the dynamics that are conducive to harm and to benefits, of course. And I think we have done a lot already on this. And Zephyr, for example, you were pointing to many of them. But then there are 2 other steps which are very important. The second one is, are we off track compared to the equilibrium, to the social optimum where we want to be? And in that case, what we need to ask is, are markets able to self-correct to a certain extent? Can, for example, workers enact some kind of resistance toward technology? Do employers anticipate what is going to be the impact of certain technology on the employees, and therefore avoid to use certain type of technologies? These are questions that we need to ask. And the second question is the regulatory framework that we currently have already capable of addressing certain issues that we see emerging? So, for example, the GDPR. Maybe the GDPR can be used by employees to prevent certain types of data abuses. Okay. Now, once you have defined actually the scope of your intervention, once you have decided that you are off track, at least for certain issues, then you need to understand how you can correct the trajectory. What is the policy that you can implement in order to achieve the social optimum? In that case, of course, you need to ask, what are the tools that you want to use? And at the European Union level, we have a wide spectrum. You can go from communication, the least invasive, to regulation, right? The most invasive is not clearly obvious what you need to use. And finally, what is the content of this? Do we want just to extend what we have in the Platform Work Directive to the traditional workplace? Do we want blanket bans? Do we want something more? All these. So this was just like to frame a little bit the kind of questions, and I'm looking forward for the discussion to report back as well.
Thank you very much, Mario, and thank you to all the panelists. I'm going to kick off with a couple of questions to the panelists, and then I'm happy to open it up to the audience. So maybe first a question for Henry and Tomislav specifically. So Henry spoke about sort of like changing the organizing paradigm from sort of like a jobs-based paradigm to a skills-based paradigm. And then we had an interesting example of how potentially that may be unfolding in practice, not necessarily with the move from jobs to skills, but there was definitely, at least I saw quite a lot about skills and new types of skills that are necessary for humans in this new world where, so Tomislav talked about the idea that it's not that you get the humans out of the loop, but they find a different role. And I would like to provoke the both of you a little bit, because in Tomislav's case, for example, obviously the seed sorters, right, they had developed already quite a lot of tacit knowledge by doing the seed sorting themselves. So they had the tacit knowledge, which obviously appears to be quite valuable in order to be able to feed back to the machine learning experts and to develop. They also get the space and time, of course, also as well to develop this more connecting and enabling collaborations role, let's say, in the organization, right? But my question is, if we think a little bit further into the future, where we get a lot of tasks to be automated, how do we manage the development of expertise? How do we manage the development of skills that are needed when the routine, mundane tasks that we had in place for developing tacit knowledge may not be there anymore? So I would like your thoughts on that. So what would the seed sorters in 20, 30 years from now, for example, do from your different perspectives? Who wants to start? Tomislav, you want to start?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so of course, I'm all for the idea to not talk about jobs, but tasks, because of course you can say that the job of seed sorting did disappear, but that doesn't mean that people lost their jobs. But there's a different set of tasks that emerged. But every skill, it's not that it's every skill or task, every skill is either explicit or tacit. It's more of a continuum, and every skill has both the tacit and this explicit component, right? So basically, in this particular case, maybe this tacit expertise tacit expertise that was important before is still important, because that's the thing that triggered the surprise. Oh, no, by my tacit judgment from before, I would say this is good, but the machine says that it's bad. So it's actually this, the triggering of the surprise, the triggering of the exploration. Oh, this is the way I should experiment and investigate and try to explain the decisions of the machines. That's still important, but in a very different way. So I can imagine that, of course, there's a speculation what will happen, that the knowledge that people had before, it will still be relevant, but in very different and I would say very unexpected ways, precisely because this knowledge is generated usually through a surprise. It's never that we explore because we know where we will end up. Of course, a lot of things can be automated, but those are precisely these explicit tasks that are automatable. So I guess the importance of the tacit expertise will even be greater than before. And basically, as long as we talk about explicit tacit as two different things, automation, augmentation as two different things, we are kind of missing the point, because automation brings augmentation, because precisely it changes why a skill is relevant, and also it enables you to basically perform this automated task in a new way, more enriching way, as the seed sorters show.
Henry, what do you think? How can we maintain the development of expertise and skills in a future that is increasingly automated and eventually augmented? So how are we enabling the humans to develop skills in order to work with or through the machine?
Yeah, good question. I also fully agree with Tomislav's premise there. And we're seeing kind of an interesting development that at the same time employees are becoming overqualified but underskilled. Like more and more often we see people have degrees that are not even necessarily required for the jobs that they are doing, but on the other hand, they're lacking some of these implicit skills that will be becoming more and more important. So if you look at it as from a hard skills perspective, you will be able to code or be an accountant, But these are also exactly the items where there's a lot of opportunity for AI to support and to augment. So these more human capabilities will become increasingly important. Also mentioned by you, like this curiosity, the creativity, collaboration. So these will be the areas where organizations will need to start fostering to ensure that those skills can grow in organizations. But as mentioned before, we also have this development of overqualification. So it's also something for our educational institutions to have a critical look at, okay, what skills and capabilities are being taught in the educational setup. And then one more interesting development as well is mentioned before, like tying it to the outcomes of organizations, like looking what we want to achieve now. So it's no longer the also with the societal shift, it's no longer the goal for each organization to deliver purely shareholder value, but they're looking at adding value for all stakeholders. And this also requires some changes in the organizational goals. So more looking towards organizational adaptability or being innovative as an organization. And this then feeds in directly again to those unique human skills, which will have a much greater contribution to achieving this. So the curiosity, adaptability, collaboration.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I would like to ask a question to Mario and Zephyr, and maybe I should explain sort of like the background of my question. So last year I was supervising a group of MBA students who they were doing a consultancy project investigating how European Union's policies for AI are affecting its competitive position in the global AI market. And obviously, they identified a lot of interesting aspects of the policy in terms of, in a way, impeding EU-based corporations from being as competitive as US-based or China-based corporations. So, and then I would like to reflect on as we think of the future, and as we obviously where workers are increasingly joining these more flexible work structures, geographically dispersed work structures as well. I was wondering, what are your reflections? So Zephyr mentioned thinking of antitrust, of surveillance, capitalism, labor laws. How can we ensure a more humane future of work across the globe, rather than thinking specifically of how we do it in our state or in our country, in the sense that we've got competition quite often impeding the rights of workers, and the other way around. So I know it's a challenge, but ideally, how would you see this moving forward?
How much trouble do you want me to get in? Should we read?
You made your disclaimer.
I made my disclaimer. Such a great question, but I think of anti-monopoly and trade as fundamentally connected. And rethinking, I'm an Americanist. I'm so delighted to be here because I've been a little narrowly focused, and I really want to learn. And so within the US, I think of it as a rethinking of our trade policy as well as anti-monopoly policy as being inseparable from each other, and building a resiliency model. The pandemic, among other things, showed the extraordinary health and democratic risks of just-in-time production. And so I guess I would just start there with, it's a big question, but that I'm glad it's in the room, because I think questions of power are essential here, and we should never be discussing future of work without talking about power structures. And I was really appreciative of the bringing up of the nature of the corporation. You brought it up in a limited way about the shareholder versus stakeholder, but what we're talking about is as my colleague Sanju Tapal often talks about, is the right to coordinate. Who has the right to coordinate and who doesn't have the right to coordinate? And a lot of what we're talking about in the future of work is disabling the right to coordinate on the part of workers, while radically increasing the power up to coordinate because of information and not changing the rights to coordinate within the scope of the post-1860s corporate form. And so we sort of leave the corporate form intact, that those rights are presumed intact, and then the last 40 years of trade policy intact, and try to mess with everything else. It's strange what we're leaving intact, I guess. That's
Thank you. No, I mean, I will try to be super brief because so that we leave also the floor. I mean, I can to ask questions as well. So two things. First, I mean, there is a lot of research that shows already that acceptance is also part of the solution of the problem. So, I mean, if you don't address issues with technologies, like for example for workers, then technology will be less integrated in the workplace by definition, right? Therefore, I mean, there is also a rational advantage from an economic advantage, really, if you want more adoption by addressing the issues. But, I mean, the more provocative point that I want to make is that, I mean, this is a typical type of arguments that is always brought up by, by the business, essentially, historically, always, whenever, I mean, there is an issue, that is emerging, is being addressed, then we could reverse it and we could say, well, why don't we if we want to become more competitive, why don't we eliminate holidays, or sick leave? No, I mean, there is a place where we want to be. We want to be in a place in which workers are not abused by technology, and that's not negotiable. And I don't think it's an interesting question as such. I mean, because this comes first. Then, I mean, we will see how we will, we will be in terms of competitiveness worldwide. I think it's going to help, but even if it wouldn't, I mean, I think this is not negotiable.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Mario. Thank you. And good to hear that this is the way of thinking. Well, you're thinking, okay. Yeah, we should remember the disclaimers. So how about we invite some questions from the audience? Maybe, okay, let's start from the back. Bogdan, you had a question?
Okay, thank you. My name is Bogdan Deleanu. I work in the Renew Europe group in the European Parliament. As you know, there's a regulation currently being negotiated, the AI Act. Is a very important piece of legislation for this debate, had about 3,000 amendments. And one of the key points of the discussion is the kinds of AI that are going to be considered high risk. And the discussion here is to ban high risk AI, or at least to contain them. And from your point of view, which would be the high risk AI that maybe should be banned when it comes to labor and work?
Who would like to take it?
This is a very dangerous question. I cannot really answer. No, I mean, no, honestly, I mean, of course, I'm expressing my personal view. Okay, so it's a negotiation with the Parliament. I think this is a prerogative for the Parliament now to find out. There are extreme cases, of course, which are pretty clear cut. I mean, if you consider somebody who is fired just because the algorithm decided that, and it's not, and the decision is not vetted by any humans. I think this is pretty clear cut or something you don't want to have, right? I mean, and in fact, it's something that we also have in the Platform Work Directive. You can appeal that. So this type of borderline, but we need to consider. But I would like to make to be more precise on what you just said. We don't want, in general, to ban high-risk artificial intelligence because it can also be very beneficial, right? I mean, for example, for workers, it could increase safety if it is well used, right? So, it's a very subtle exercise to make. I mean, when you take a decision such as banning an outright ban, I mean, you run the risk of losing a lot of benefits. So, I mean, it's very subtle. I mean.
Thank you.
I already expressed a view on this, but I want to use the chance to elaborate it. I think the thing that I would think about banning is first-degree labor price discrimination. Now, what that doesn't ban, actually, and I think there's a separate value in banning certain forms of data collection, but what it bans is the ability to treat workers differently. It doesn't ban firing, right? And it is actually, I think it will lead to a different kind of data collection because you're not collecting in order to precisely accommodate different workers' wages. And I think that's where the greatest democratic risk is. And so then it is not that safety can't be protected. It is that what we see already, and again, I'm very interested in the European experience, but in the US, it is very easy to justify any kind of data collection on safety grounds. And frankly, legitimately in a lot of cases, but once you collect the data, you know, there's a reason all the FBI people ended up spying on their girlfriends once they got the data. Like, data collection will be abused. So the question is the use of the data as one category, and then obviously there's some levels of personal collection which shouldn't happen. But I actually think the use is the stronger area, and I have repeatedly called myself an anti-monopolist, not just antitrust, for a reason, is in the American tradition, the idea of banning first-degree price discrimination is very much part of the progressive movement. This is not a new idea. It's what sort of the core, one of my heroes, Brandeis, didn't like coupons because a coupon was a democratic risk because it meant there wasn't a public price for things. So it calls into sort of deep democratic theory, the understanding that we should not be treating the same behavior differently. So I don't know as much about the directive, and I want to learn more, but I think that changing the incentives for extraction, for data collection for extraction reasons is valuable. And I think this conversation has been helpful because, of course, it's totally different than the kind of AI and seed sorting.
Thanks very much. Let's, your name, and you would like to ask your question, yes?
Yeah. Sorry, Jill, I'm a PhD and I also run the Racism and Tech Center. So I think I want to take, I guess, a bigger approach to this, which is, so there's a lot of mention about human, there's a lot of mention of a humane approach. And the question is like, who is the human that you're talking about? So in order for automation and for AI to happen, right? So I'm building on the work of like Julian Posada, Milagros Miseli, Phil Jones, where for large data sets to be cleaned, to be labeled, for the use of algorithms, this requires people cleaning, labeling this data, right? Clicking on videos, ensuring that it's the right categorization. And all of these work is outsourced to companies like Venezuela, India, Kenya, who do these like work for 1 cent per task. So for the development of our AI, we require extreme exploitation of people in economic precarity, in unsafe situations, in refugee camps in Lebanon and Syria. So my question here is really like, when we talk about worker, when we talk about human, when we talk about automation, is AI really necessary, and at what cost and at whose innovation? I know it's a big question. I just kind of want to tackle kind of the elephant in the room. Yeah, thank you.
I absolutely agree. So of course I can just kind of talk about my case at least. So I absolutely agree that it's a problem with exploitation and it's a real problem. Is AI necessary? Absolutely not. I mean, there are a lot of things that you can solve with AI that you can more easily solve with much simpler technology that doesn't need even data collection. But there is a huge hype, and there is a lot of organizations are, they had greenwashing, now they have AI washing. We just need something in development so we can put it on a website. Nothing else matters. So I absolutely agree that it's not necessary, and kind of where I'm coming from when I'm talking about introducing AI in organizations, I would say that I'm a big advocate that everything is done in-house. Why? Because to make AI workable in an organization, it needs to be contextualized for that organization. And a lot of the problems that we see with AI is precisely outsourcing and exploiting people. So you're doing a huge harm there. But then also you use that data that's not actually relevant for the organization using it, and then harming another group on a different side of the planet. So it's kind of bad all around. So if I would say, if you're a manager, you want to use some AI first, see if it's even needed, or are you just AI washing? Second of all, just build the capability in-house. I mean, I've been with, in this company, I've been with people that were, as I mentioned, millions of seedlings, good, bad, but it was done in-house. I mean, who else can say what a good plant is besides a person that's been surrounded with plants their whole life? Some definitely, I mean, it doesn't really maybe answer completely the question, but at least from my side, those would kind of be the pointers.
Henry, would you like to bring the industry perspective?
Yeah,
maybe?
no, definitely. And yeah, first of all, yeah, great question. It's something that we should definitely address at all times. And I think it also just shows the relevance of these type of questions that the other breakout is focused specifically on AI and ethics. So I think it's top of mind for everybody. And then from an organizational perspective, I think it follows the same philosophy. Like we should not look purely at, okay, what is the best bottom line that we can get, for example, looking at different vendors in the AI space, but also to very deliberately take this into account. Okay, it's not only about perhaps getting the best performance, but also ensuring that these extremely important peripheral requirements are also addressed. And then maybe on a related topic, eliminating the AI being viewed as a black box is also kind of extremely important for organizations. That should never be this guessing work on why are the outcomes the way that they are. It's also not required to know every explicit detail, but an understanding and almost like a justification of the decisions would also is also a necessity.
But I think we fundamentally disagree here on this, though. I mean, just like, I mean, the initial, unless I misunderstood your initial provocation, what we are talking about is not tasks, and I think that the risk of talking about things in terms of tasks and skills and not jobs is that you are then severing the connection between the firm and the people doing the work. So classification and supply chain liability are both parts of a different understanding of the boundaries of the firm and the possibility of the idea of an employee, a worker, not just a sort of a skill-based approach. I mean, like that I think that the people who are doing the classification should be treated within law as a worker for that organization, as opposed to a set of skills that organization can outsource and therefore not be responsible for. Do you disagree? I mean, what does the skills job distinction do if it doesn't then sever that? What's at stake with saying jobs, skills, not jobs?
I think it ties into the broader discussion you raised of simply the supply chain, and then identify, okay, since you can also just see it as buying the data, but then that would be the wrong approach, since then it's not part of a single supply chain anymore. So I don't see that we disagree on this topic. I actually fully agree. It should be, it's also what I mentioned before, as an organization, when taking into account, okay, what is then the supplier or which element of the chain will deliver this work, it should be fully transparent, and it should be part of the organization's goal and ambition to share, to ensure that there's shared values, not only for the coworkers in, let's say, the headquarter countries, but everybody participating in that supply chain. So, not sure if we're disagreeing.
Okay. So maybe, and well, we can go on. Yeah.
Maybe one last question. You had a question, yes. Yes.
Hi, this is Anja from the University of Münster in Germany. I have a question regarding the collaboration or separation of humans and AI. We were talking about AI and humans should be separated, kind of we talked about automation or augmentation. Now we said, well, in seed sorting, actually humans learn from AI, so there's kind of a cooperation. So I think we have to think of it in terms of an interaction across time, so kind of a process model. Some of you from the academia might know the famous paper from Reich and Tarkovsky and the Academy of Management Gravity. They have thought on that. And I would like to hear your views on how automation and augmentation can follow up across time and which parts of the task should be automated or augmented because of which specific capabilities of humans or AI. So it goes a bit into your direction of explicit and tacit knowledge and so on. But I think if we understand which tasks and skills are automatable or augmentable, then we can actually have better policy implications.
Yeah. Can I quickly reply? Yeah. Very quick. Maybe we get another question maybe as well. Thank you for the question. Very important. I would say we cannot really decide. We cannot know ourselves. But part of the policy solution is to involve as much as possible those who will use the technology, right? I mean, something you hinted to as well. So the participatory design of technology maybe can address that question, right? What do we want to augment? Well, what I think is going to be useful for me, what is going to complement my human being, right? So that's the solution also for the long term, involving as much as possible workers, which tied also with what Sharon just mentioned this morning, right? I mean, like, involve workers, the collective bargaining. I think this is crucial. Yeah.
Absolutely, and I mean, maybe to tie it to a little bit on Zephyr's earlier point, right? I think looking at past work transformations, participatory design has also been a platform for engaging the unions and thinking of the worker and protecting the rights. So definitely, I think fits. Thank you. Well, let's take one. Yes, would you like Henry to add to that, or because I saw you holding the.
Oh no, I just.
Sorry. Thank you.
Maybe just quick. I mean, I fully agree, and I am doing process research, so also glad we're on the same page. But what I would say that it's actually a mistake to kind of separate this is what AI does with this is what human does. So kind of to go a bit more academic, but at least I know that you'll follow it. So I'm talking about an assemblage, right? That it doesn't make sense really to think of humans and AI as kind of two different things, but it's one system in which both machines and humans are acting and interacting, right? So basically here, what I think is a mistake is what I said when when an organization treats a human as just or sets up work, that the human is just the passive receiver of an output, right? The give alone, don't give alone, because you're robbing humans of the knowledge that they used to have and of agency that they used to have. And of course, because they can't act anymore, they just follow a set of instructions of a model. And there's no learning. There's also the power dynamics change because you can't act anymore in the organization, but you're just, well, nothing. You're just, yes, yeah, the machine said yes or the machine said no. You're just communicating what the machine did. So of course, this participatory design and use, kind of participatory use, so that working really together, not separate tasks, but really together with AI, constantly trying to also understand what's actually going on inside. That's what's important, and of course, only a process model can truly show it.
Thank you, Tomislav. Let's take one last question. Johan, did you have a question?
Yeah, but I need to go to my posters. I have a quick question then. So Jochen Kroes, I'm associate at Erasmus University. I had a question for Henry actually, because what you opened, I think, really resonated with me and probably with most of us. But for the case of time, you have to be quite short, right? So you missed some nuance there, and I think the trick lies into how do we think of this boundary between where we want the consecration of human touch because it brings something unique, and where we can be happy with the mechanical step, right? And you sketched the high-level approach where you look at organizational outcome and then backwards design, but I assume there's different approaches that you'll see in practice. And this, to me, it's not science, right? Because things like power come in, culture come in, at a very high level, we're talking about things that we just cannot quantify when we're talking about human touch. So what is an approach that's problematic that you've seen in practice where it actually fails to deliver the promises that you just sketched? And what is the right approach to figure this out?
Yeah, great question. Big question as well. So it ties in, okay, how do you address this as an organization? And it ties into the think big, start small. So you should have a vision of where you want to move towards in the future, and then identify where can you already address it and already start seeing the benefits. So one of the key areas where organizations will be able to start small here is this transition towards a more skills-based organization. And just to that earlier point, I fully agree, it should not be separated, but it's working towards a shared goal with AI and humans alike. just ties into the skills the skills question. Which skills are required from humans to take best advantage of the opportunities offered by AI? And then when implementing the skills-based organization, you kind of have 3 approaches that you can take. So either one is to identify a function or group in an organization where you want to start implementing skills-based rather than jobs-based. But you can also flip it the entire other way around, that you start with your work, that the tasks that need to be delivered is almost like shared in an internal platform or marketplace. Okay, this is what we need to deliver, and then coworkers and employees can start participating in this task. So you can do it from an organizational top-down perspective or from a more work bottom-up perspective.
Thanks very much, Henry. I'm mindful of the time, and it's time to conclude so that we move to the next poster slash lunch session. So thank you very much to all the panelists, Tomislav, Zephyr, Mario, and Henry.